I think you should be on a win streak to fight for a title in the UFC.
Okay. To avoid strawman and Guru, we have to consider that being on a win streak leading into a title fight is obviously ideal. So if that's all he means in saying that a contender should be on a win streak, then it's a moot point to make because no one would disagree with that. Instead, what he's seemingly suggesting is that a win streak ought be a necessary condition for a contender to receive a title fight. But this is silly and unnecessarily restrictive, and here's why. Before and above anything else, the championship title represents who the best fighter in the world is in a given weight division. Taking a journey back to 2009 and 2010 when we were in what Joe Rogan declared as the Machida era at light heavyweight, Machida's first defense was a decision win against Shogun Rua in a fight that most people thought he actually lost. Instead of requiring Shogun to rally up not just one but multiple wins in a row over the next year or so, the UFC booked an immediate rematch and Shogun knocked Machida out in the first round, proving that he was indeed the better fighter at that time. But why was there an immediate rematch? Obviously because there was a demand from the fans, but that demand was so strong precisely because Lyoto held the title that represented something that most people thought was more appropriately applied to Shogun. In other words, Shogun got the rematch because most people thought he was the better fighter. And not just the better fighter, but the best fighter in the weight class, the true champion despite the judge's decision. Because this kind of immediate rematch very rarely, if ever, happens for non-title fights. However, under Guru's posited prerequisite for a title shot, that rematch would not have happened. And since Jon Jones' title reign was right around the corner, Shogun would likely have never been the UFC champion. But that's not the only reason to give a title shot to a contender not on a win streak. When Nick Diaz fought GSP for the welterweight title, he was coming off a decision loss to Carlos Condit for the interim championship. Leading up to that loss, Diaz was on an 11-fight win streak, was the lineal Strikeforce champion, and had just put a beating on a top-ranked BJ Penn. And even though his loss was officially by way of unanimous decision, this unanimity was not at all shared by the general public, with most fans, at least on MMA Decision, scoring it in Nick's favor and cries of Diaz 125 becoming a meme. So at the very least, a massive portion, if not even the majority of MMA fans were not convinced that Condit was actually better than Diaz. So coming off of what was officially a loss, but with the fan base rallying behind him, Diaz fought GSP for the title after GSP had already defeated Condit. Now this fight was years in the making, with tons of exciting build-up, iconic presser moments, memes generated, and with title unification implications that were unknown to the welterweight division up to that point. Condit was the WC welterweight champion, Diaz was the Strikeforce welterweight champion, and the UFC had just recently absorbed both of them to establish itself as the premier organization with the bar-none best fighters in the world. It was one of the biggest fights to make at that time for multiple reasons, and not just at welterweight but in MMA in general. But if Guru was the UFC matchmaker, this fight and all of its buildup would likely have never happened, since Diaz didn't officially win a fight again after his victory over BJ Penn. Now for clarity's sake, I do want to reiterate that I don't think a title shot ought only be given to someone that people regard as plausibly the best fighter in the world, although I do think that is clearly the most relevant criterion in keeping with the meaning of the championship title itself. But freshness, stylistic interest, drama, and other criteria are all relevant considerations factoring into the ideal title fight calculus, to put it in a very nerdy way. Anyway, much more can actually be said if you follow out the implications of this viewpoint, but those are just a couple of reasons why I think Guru's posited necessary condition for a title shot is unnecessarily restrictive. If you have any counterpoints, leave a comment below, and if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching. Peace.